Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas, and I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about bridging the gap between developers and artists. Bringing a game to life means more than writing great code or creating stunning art. It requires harmony between both. But technical collaboration between developers and artists often hits snags, from miscommunication to mismatched expectations. So, today in this episode, our guests explores how to build workflows that support both sides of the pipeline, drawing from their own experience as a Unity developer and project coordinator for creative and educational game projects. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everybody, how's it going? And we're back. And today with us, I'm happy to share that we have Rick Williams and Rodrigo Alonzo. Guys, thank you so much for being here. And how's it been going? What are you up to?
It's good. Thanks for having us. We are currently at a Unity conference at the Johns Hopkins University in Maryland.
Oh, I love that. Like, it was funny when you first, when we were doing some pre-show talk and stuff, you're like, yeah, I'm at this Unity conference. And I'm like, wow, way to be dedicated to everything and in the moment with game dev and everything. And here we are talking about it. So I feel privileged and excited that you guys, are making this happen at that event. So it's really cool. I would love for us to, get to know you real quick and, have you give a little brief introduction, to yourself. You both have different roles and stuff. So please, brief introduction about what it is you're doing and what you're working on.
Yeah. So I've been a hobbyist game developer since 2001, probably. Just as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to make games. I bounced around, built games as a hobby in that time period until about 2015 when I decided to get serious about it. And I studied as a generalist, learned everything from 3D art, 2D art, audio, writing, design, and everything with programming and in the engine. So I'm now a professional Unity developer. I do contracts and I release indie games and I teach boot camps. So that is my basis, and I just love every aspect of development.
Wow, that's crazy, going from just being interested in it to doing full blown pro on all assets of it. I love it. And Rodrigo, how about yourself?
I'm a graphic designer by trade, but on games I mainly do 2D art, animations, lots of illustrations, concept art, whatever is needed. I started around early beginnings around 2010, projects that never went anywhere. And then around 2020, I took it more seriously, and particularly networking with people around the Baltimore area has been very, very useful to kind of just, speed up a lot of the learning there.
Awesome. Yeah. And great point too about the whole, networking side of things and getting to that point where it's like, all right, I'm going to really take this seriously, and then expanding that network and everything else. And, here we are talking about, making games at a game conference. Can't get any better than that. So absolutely love it. Well, appreciate you guys sharing a little bit about yourselves, and would like to get more into this conversation in a moment, because first we're going to have you guys go through the Q Box round. And folks, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Q Box round, it's just a series of, a few random questions I prepared here today for Rick and Rodrigo. So guys, are you ready for the Q Box round?
Sure. Let's go.
All right. I love it. First one is, what's, the most influential or inspiring game for you?
So for me, I would say probably Mega Man X. There was something about the power progression, the art style, the mastery of the mechanics of the game that just seeded something inside of me that told me this is what gaming is about. Also, the social experience I had at daycare with all of my friends, as we all vied to be able to beat a level with one life. That's really good.
I love
For
it.
me, it's Bastion. Oh, terribly sorry. For me, it's Bastion because it was the first game I played that was like art first, and I was like, wow, this is a thing that can happen, and it just made a big impact on me.
That's awesome. I don't think I ever played Bastion, which I feel really bad to admit. I definitely have played Mega Man, and the music to me stays with me. Maybe that's the reason why I got into heavy metal a little bit. Not, but at any rate, love it. All right, next is what's the most helpful or impactful advice you guys ever received?
For me, it's gonna look ugly for a while, which is really good advice if you're doing illustrations, as it will look ugly for the first 2 hours, and then as you polish it, it looks better.
Love it.
With
Sorry.
For me, it would be the advice: everyone is better than you at something. So no matter how proficient or skillful you are at the thing that you are good at, somebody who you've just met is going to be more knowledgeable or have more expertise in something that you can't compete with. It could be, somebody from the mountains of West Virginia might, they might not know a lot about certain things that you're aware of, but they can gut a deer in 2 minutes, right? There's always something that you have to learn from somebody.
I love both of those points. And the last one, and the staple here on the show is, what game are you guys playing now?
What is there?
Yeah, this is funny. We both have old games. I'm currently playing EverQuest 1, released in 1999, but they do these time-locked progression servers where you play through the expansion release cycle on an accelerated timeline. So it's just kind of reliving the old experience of those games with people who are likewise nostalgic for it.
Fine wine, by the way. It's an old.
Yeah, it's fun. I love that game. It's like, I love the way that the characters are asymmetric. Like, you play a hero, and there's some things that you're just not good at, and you rely on other players. Like the healer is really good at healing, but he can't kill anything by himself. The tank is really good at taking damage, but like kills things slow and can't heal himself. Like, you have to work with other people. It's such a cool game that I don't see enough of in modern games.
Well, you don't see that kind of design anymore. Now design is just so more. It's things are so much more well-rounded now. Like, there's no things that are just like as rough as they used to be in the 90s.
Yeah. Everyone can solo. That's a design principle now. It's kind of like
a lot. Yeah,
more interesting when you rely on other players.
For me, I'm playing Warcraft 2 now, having a blast, and it's the same thing. Like, really appreciating how rough it kind of is, and at the same time, I'm like, this is fine. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. Like, I love the 2D style, and like the mechanics are so clunky, and I probably shouldn't be saying that they're clunky, but they kind of are compared to now.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's a fantastic game too. We also talked a little bit about how, since we do a lot of game dev, we don't get to play a lot of games. It's kind of paradoxical. Maybe it's a shared experience with a lot of game developers.
It totally is.
Yeah.
Like,
It's a
start
me
learning
problem
what
too.
Yeah. You start learning what it takes to build a game, and it like sucks all of your focus, and then all the energy you used to put into mastering games, you're putting into your game development expertise and learning all of those tools.
Yeah.
It's like the final game, building your own.
And then you need to unwind, and sometimes that means you're not playing a game to unwind because you've been busy building one all day.
It means taking a slow walk through your neighborhood and looking at everybody's yard work and thinking, "Oh, I like the way they set up their patio." Like,
it's funny because I do that. Awesome. Well, love that, and that we got to know you guys a little bit more. And now let's get into the heart of this conversation, which I led in with the intro, which is we're going to be talking about bridging the gap between developers and artists. And what better way to do that than have a developer and an artist with us today? So to kind of kick things off, I know, you in particular, Rick, has, worn many hats from, the first time I met you to what you just shared with us today. Lots of different hats, and, not unlike a lot of other developers out there too. I'm just curious, how has that shaped your understanding of working closely with artists on, indie teams, and like, does it have any impact or anything?
Yeah. An interesting thing is, like, I primarily do the engineering side of development now, and I work in the engine and I do a lot of the software architecture. But I initially got into this wanting to be a 3D technical artist.
Mm.
My background when I was a hobbyist, when I was a kid, everybody told me, if you want to make games, take math classes and learn to code, right? So I went to school for computer science, and I learned all of the fundamentals of object-oriented programming, different kind of data science practices. And then, I decided to go entrepreneurial, and I went into like the other industries, and I never dropped the hobbyist element of it. When I came back, I programmed an entire engine from scratch because I didn't know about Unity at the time. And I built like a time trial game. But I was also 3D modeling. And I remember having like a quarter life crisis where, in the industry I was in, I was like, okay, I'm making money, but I hate what I'm doing. Like, it's just not fulfilling.
Mm.
If I get to 65 and retire and have money and never tried, I'm not going to be happy. So I challenged myself that summer. If I can build a full game, I'm going to go. And I self-taught Blender, and I 3D modeled the assets. It was called a hovercraft racer game, because to animate it, all you have to do is tilt it left and right.
Ah, okay.
So I went back to school for 3D art, and I was introduced to Unity through that. So like my whole focus has been on creating really cool visual aesthetics and trying to find a way to create engaging gameplay combined with that really compelling visual style. And through doing that, I learned all of the elements of 3D art, UVing and rigging, animation, bringing stuff in with tech art, manipulating the material maps at runtime to like create cool effects. And I took lots of art classes, 2D composition, and as a generalist, you kind of learn, okay, well, let me learn a little bit about a digital audio workshop, and let me think about the design of what goes into it. And you start to appreciate and understand games as a holistic experience. It's not just the gameplay that you program those mechanics. It's not just the visual style. It's not just the story. It's everything that comes together in concert. And because I had kind of danced around and toyed around in all of the different elements of it, you can understand what you're aiming at. You can speak a little bit of the lexicon of like what you're trying to create. You can understand the psychology behind a visual style, behind auditory experience. And so, you just kind of try to tie it all together, and you have the thing that you specialize in, but you need to contribute and collaborate with somebody who has a focus in another one of those things, and you figure out how to merge together towards that common end of an enjoyable gameplay experience.
I really love how what you just shared there, and because it really like kind of segues in really nice to this other area I want to get into, and Rodrigo, get your thoughts on, because a lot of what you talked about is having these understandings of the different components and aspects of the process, right? And that's going to help you articulate, communicate these things. So Rodrigo, I'm curious, when it comes to like alignment and stuff, what would you say are some of the most like common maybe disconnects that developers and artists can have, especially in the early stages? Because articulating art to development and stuff can, I'm sure, sometimes be a little bit challenging.
I think both artists and programmers kind of assume to have an understanding of what the other does, and it really works better if both parties know a little bit of what the other one does. Especially now that like the state of the game industries right now is pushing towards the smaller teams. Perhaps the era of specializations is coming a little bit to an end there. You never know. But for me, I started on 2020, picked up an engine, Game Maker seemed like the best. And I started making like a platformer. I did all the graphics, pixel art, and everything like that. But I really got hung on the technical aspects. Like an auto tiler, for example, seemed like magic to me. Like you can just, plop your tiles and it'll just fill which kind of tile it should be. And I started like just working on how to speed that up. Eventually did a multi-part process that involved Sprite, Tilesetter, which is a fantastic program, and then just plopping all that up to GameMaker to finally just me writing my own auto tiler, and from there, like, there's this understanding that you're not just doing plain things for game development. You're also kind of developing systems. Like, very quickly you realize that, at least for art assets and for scripts and what have you, you're going to be writing a lot of them. I mean, hundreds of them. So setting up a pipeline, it's just so useful as early as possible.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that because that's 100% correct. Artists will sometimes, it's kind of like you have your discipline and you're good at creating the individual assets, but what it takes to make those aspects or those aspects of your development in something that's usable in the game engine for the next person who's going to grab it and use it, you have to set up certain conventions. Like I've with almost every artist when they're first starting, it's something like you have to explain things like, make sure that you bring me the texture assets in power of 2 resolutions. And that's just because there's a certain efficiency that happens on the back end that you just need to be aware of. It's not something that makes logical sense from anything other than it's just the way that it works within the engine. There's understanding that, if you deliver, like, let's say an animated sprite, that you want to make sure that every character that you create has like the same common set of animations, like categorical animations, a walk, a run, an attack, an idle, so that they can then plug into the systems. It's understanding the technical requirements of somebody who's using it within the next step in the process, the assembly process. If you don't have any context or insight on what that looks like, then there's a lot of conversation that has to happen, and honestly acquiescing on the part of the artist who hasn't learned better, because we're using the engines, like the engine developers are actively using the engines, and they don't really have the ability, like they have, some stuff is within their control to manipulate, but there are some hard requirements that have to be adhered to make the process efficient.
Yeah, there can be like no secrets, like no chef secrets when it comes to how do you develop a game. And the same thing goes for art. You should be as open as possible about how these things are made. And at the same time, if you find a pipeline, the easiest that it is to explain it to someone else, I'm completely convinced that that's the strongest pipeline, the one that's simplest to explain to someone else.
So, I'm curious then, based on that, because that makes complete sense. Like, was there ever a time, with you guys in your project that, maybe that you could use as an example where, this, your own collaboration with each other really made a project, made the project better or whatever, because of this collaboration that's going on?
Well, but there's a lot of talking to what we do, because behind all the things, there's usually like a problem, and whether it's a volume problem or a consistency problem. For example, one recent one that we have was a UX problem, whether or not the player would be able to identify the units in the game, in this small RTS that we're making. And from then we had a very long conversation about how the process works, lots of references. We always use a lot of references. Somebody already did the homework for us. So if you can, reference a project and, like, this is what they did, so we should take a cue from that, it works the better. So for example, in there, we came up with a few solutions to make sure that players would know which units are their units and which ones are the opponent units, including, how do they move? From which side are they coming in? What the colors combination they have? Within the color combinations, we also had a conversation on people that are colorblind. Because I never thought of that. So it's just like, oh, we should have more complex combinations.
And I'm colorblind.
I never considered that. So it's nice to kind of like lay it all out and kind of just discuss all these things. But respectfully, on good faith, and just trusting the other person. Like, Rick can implement pretty much anything I can kind of think of. And at the same time, I like to think that I can come up with a solution for graphics that will not only look good, but also will be kind of cheap and repeatable because we got a lot of assets to make.
Yeah, to elaborate on that. So I believe you played the version of the game where the characters were tinted. We have little sprite characters. They look kind of like Marines from StarCraft.
Yeah.
Right.
And what we did was we did a color tinting to differentiate them, which just, multiply layer across the whole sprite. Everything is universally tinted. And, that was good to tell them apart. And we didn't realize it at the time, but we had accidentally stumbled to a maximum UX end result where it was just very easy for us as players to tell the units apart. We wanted to get a little more refined with it by taking our sprites and create a custom shader so that we could do some color swapping, so we could have a base sprite and then give them accent colors. And that, without us anticipating it, unveiled a new problem with UX where when we initially tried, we did a small portion of them where, it looked great on the sprite by itself. Like, oh yeah, that's totally a different player. But as the units got together, the size of the unit on the screen mattered. It was very small. And as the units got together, the way that the sprites clustered, they created like these interesting noise patterns as all of their characters like layered over top of each other that caused different considerations. Like there's regions to the end of the blob of this unit, and like all of their faces create like this repeating pattern. And it caused a consideration where we had to revisit exactly how we were coloring the characters. And we had a conversation back and forth. We had to go through like UX reasonings, the discussion about the color blindness. And it was, what we had to do is we had to reconcile our perspectives and our understanding of why things needed to change. Because I initially, I think you thought it was really good as it was. And I was just like, well, we need to have a change. But, if you don't see eye to eye right away, then you have to have that good faith conversation.
Well, and partially one of the systems that we use, we take cues from a lot of places. One of them is from improv, improvisation on performers, where they have this yes and system where you don't use the word no because the word no is very destructive. So your answer will always be yes, comma, and then you add something else to it. And we try to use that system as much as possible. It's very rare that we say no to a thing. We kind of see it to its completion. When I met Rick, he had a similar system for dealing with what happens when people have ideas, because people have many ideas when it's in game development. And it was the ownership system, which I haven't heard of up until then, which is that if you have an idea, if you have a concept that you want to make, that is your baby. You have to implement it. And between those two things, we do get a lot accomplished, I feel.
Yeah, and building off of that, one of the things that's really nice is like if there's a certain technical limitation that requires a technical solution, we, depending on where our area of expertise is, we will research that to make it happen. So particularly like with the shaders, Rodrigo, I love an artist who is not afraid to go into the engine, not afraid to mess with different kinds of tech tools and discover solutions that can change the input that I receive. Because I can have a conversation saying like, okay, that's cool. This is an end result that we want, but this is the current limitation based on like the deliverable that I'm receiving. This is what I would need in order to do that. And he's really good at researching and finding like another tool that can give us that exact result. And and then I can take it and I can weave it into the greater system because I've specified like I like the idea, but this is what I'm going to need, and he figures out how to get that.
Yeah, we've gone through a lot of tools that are third-party tools that we've either Rick is interested in it or I'm interested in it, and we usually see them to completion. We kind of run them through the gamut, how fast did it go? When we put it on the engine, is it working? Does it give any bugs? How fast was this to make? We use a tool called Crocodile, and we were really interested in does it have any performance issues or anything like that? So Rick ran a bunch of tests with multiple assets. It worked out really well.
Yeah, we did a whole jam specifically to learn that tool. Like Rodrigo will be like, hey, this is a cool tool. I think there might be a way to use it. And we'll just come up with a concept and jam it out. And the goal is to use and learn that tool and problem solve the challenges with it and then see what it's capable of.
Sweet. So I really like that concept too of, tools, resources, other things. And then kind of like both of you in a way, getting your hands dirty. And the jam one's really cool. Like I'm just curious, like what else has come out of that type of a system? Or are there other systems too that you use to kind of for explorative purposes and then eventually, let's say, incorporate into, your pipeline or workflow?
What do you think?
So sometimes we just experiment to see what we end up with. Like we were going for an interesting aesthetic through, we were just talking about Crocodile. If you're unfamiliar, Crocodile is a tool where you can import sprite sheets and then you can draw those sprite sheets in a like a 3D tile format and just like place your tile pieces down and you can build 3D topology. So you can just build what basically looks like Minecraft worlds, but you're just painting onto 3D space. And so we created buildings and environments and then trying to follow suit with that, Rodrigo found a cool tool called Blockbench where, you could go a little bit more granular than just the Minecraft blocky world. He was able to create, I think Blockbench is used for some Minecraft tools.
They use it a lot for Minecraft. So we did the environments with Crocodile where it was easier because it's tile maps, and assets with Blockbench because it was easier because you could just paint topology.
Yeah, and then so he was just like, hey, let's build this cool car. So we built a flying car, and so we experimented with the different aesthetics. When we got the flying car, I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if there was Gatling guns on this thing? So he just added Gatling guns for fun, and then because I had a car with Gatling guns, I programmed the mechanics to make it shoot. And then I put other cars in the sky, and you can just fly around the city just shooting people down. And we ended up with like what felt like a cyberpunk GTA. But it was you're just flying through it. It felt like you were in Fifth Element, just like shooting at all the cars. Like,
there really is something for whenever we start a project. We don't have like a set design documents. We might have like a nebulous one, but for the most part, whatever idea we have, let's just test it because creative output is its own currency. And I've been in a lot of projects where I have somebody to say like, no, you can't do that. You can't have that, idea there because it goes against the design document. And before you know it, that brings up, a lot of creative blocks there. Like, oh, what can I do? What can I do? That sort of thing.
Yeah. That kind of goes into the idea. So when we're talking about the art aesthetic, right? It's not just the engineer and the artist having a discussion together. Like you've got the design behind it. Like what is the feeling you're trying to evoke? You've got the story. Like what is the setting? What is the narrative? It's a conversation between everybody. And one of the things I love about Rodrigo's style in particular is we start at like, what are we going for? And then Rodrigo finds a bunch of references, and it's like we're not just deciding that this has to be 3D photorealistic or this is going to be hand painted. It's okay. What is the end result we're aiming for? And we find references that mood board and evoke the style, and then we work backwards from there and figure out what are the tools we're going to need to mimic this style. And then we'll start experimenting with what tools could he find, what was he able to produce, how can we implement it in the engine. And so like you kind of discover styles through that because you're trying to mimic something, but put your own twist on it. So you don't just start with like, this is how we're going to do it.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
No, that's very destructive. We will start with like, just conversation, and we'll start like pulling references from everywhere, like movies, games, different, sometimes works of art if they apply. Sometimes, some movies have some very interesting ideas that never made it. I'm not very big on concept art because you find some beautiful concept art that never made it into the project. So for example, at least for the Crocodile project, I was really into the work that Anton first did for Batman 1, the one in 1989, where there's these beautiful, just...
the brutalist style.
He has all these like concept art and stuff like that it made it into that movie as best as it could, as expensively as it could, because those things do cost money, and just like going from that, and from there will be a round of very, very quick sketches, but the main point is to kind of lay out everything that the game won't be, because you kind of want to start wide and then just start closing doors little by little to make sure you kind of just like get everybody on the same page. And then more or less you can start with like some early prototypes. I
Yeah.
feel.
Well, I really love too that you guys called out, because this is an important factor too, because it's, you know, the basically the intent behind the project. Like, what is intent? Like you said, Rick, what are we going for here? And I think that's more powerful than sometimes a lot of us think, because of how much that can really kind of like filter and kind of guide you through the process. Because otherwise, you know, as you were talking about, it's interesting, and because hearing you guys talk in your process, it's very open, right? And obviously very designed to be very collaborative. But that and I'm not saying your process, but like that idea of being too open could be a hindrance, right? Especially when you're trying to be really focused, and that's where the intent really comes in and kind of starts guiding you towards, you know, what are these solutions, what are these things that we're going to test on? Because I could see that being kind of creating problems for people, and why projects can take forever sometimes to make. And to put into perspective too, I mean, what has been the dev cycle for you guys so far?
What do you think?
So, okay, so there's a couple of different things that happen, because like there's the open-ended development where our goal is to work with a tool for the first time. And then there's, hey, we had a good time working with that tool. How can we use this tool specifically in another project? So a good example is, you know, this Space Battles project we're working on now. This is what, the third time we're using.
We started with Spriter
We started with Sprater.
in a global game jam project.
Yeah. So so it's the third time, but we went to Sprater. Then we did an experiment with Spine, and we did Spine for an educational game we released on a platform called Legends of Learning, where, you know, it was like a game where you race slimes, but, you know, it was a very simple, low scope project. But we were able to experiment with this technology using a workflow that's similar to something we'd done in the past, but we were trying a different actual tool to execute it.
Well, the design of that slime game is by an associate of us called Alan Lambert, who's a wonderful, wonderful person. He had a different design idea for what the slimes would be. I think he wanted to change the color of them with the hue, you know, slider or something like that, because it's like a game that taught people, kids, genealogy, from what I remember, biology, how things reproduce. So he had thought that part really well, but just the technology part, you know, he kind of pitched it to us, and it was just like, well, maybe we can do something a little bit more. And Spine does have the option for different skins, so we were able to do a lot more than just change the colors. Like we were changing like parts, like every little part from the slime.
Yeah, we were using a system called Skins, and we ended up coming up with an alternative solution because there was weird bugs and only WebGLs. But what we did in essence was we experimented with that in a project where the goal was to learn it, and then we used it for base battles, knowing like, hey, listen, we had a good we have done a previous iteration of this game concept. Okay, so I'm going to backtrack completely with this context. And the current Base Battles game we're working on is Base Battles 3. We based this concept off of a previous jam that we did that was a 1-week jam that was Base Battles 2. And that was based off of a concept that was a 1-weekend jam that we did that was Base Battles 1. So you have this 2-day dev cycle where you just say like, hey, we've got this like concept. Let's just see if we can rock out the basic loop of it and just see if it's fun and compelling. It stuck with us for a while. And you weren't on that team. Like that happened.
The first one.
Yeah, that happened a while back, but he participated in the second jam. Yeah. And that was a week-long jam where we said, all right, we have this basic core concept, and, you know, this is fun, this is entertaining. I bet it would be cool if instead of 1 unit you had 3, and if you had a more advanced way to interact with the resources, right? So we did some testing and iteration, and we built those systems out in a week. Then for the third version, we said, you know what, like this is really solid. Like let's try to do a vertical slice, like do a 30-day, just jam out on it. And so when we said, okay, this is going to be a more serious project, we looked at tools and workflows, like this is our 8th project together.
Yeah.
So we have done other projects in the past where we have experimented and sussed out workflows. And we said, okay, we're kind of familiar with this tool pipeline. Like, let's actually try to like do something serious with this one now that we've familiarized ourselves with the tools and we understand it well enough. So we were able to continue to expand our expertise in using these tools, him from within the tool and me from using it. And we settled on something good. And then we just continued to expand the base concept of the game. So the design element of it, it's I would argue it's 4th iteration us going, because we've decided to go beyond the 3rd game, and then we're just fleshing it out to a complete product.
We're now starting a more of a polishing phase where we're trying to suss out, the consistency of the graphics into hopefully something commercial.
So we use the initial phases of development to find the fun. And once we had the fun in small pockets, we decided to expand upon what was fun about it.
Yeah, and what I love about this, and if we kind of get down to brass tacks, as they say, I mean, this whole process, the iterations and everything else, it's been about like a few months, right?
So I think we're just over like 7 complete weeks of development time, because we took a couple weeks off, and like maybe we're into our 8th week.
We started in May. After May, I asked for a month off so I can see other technologies. I came back with the shader graph, after running shader graphs tutorials, and now I'm back on making more assets with Cap.
Yeah,
this was the other artist working on this.
Yeah. So a key element of it is we have plans for when we build out, and we kind of have good stopping points. And when we get to those stopping points, we sometimes put a pause and we take a break and we say, listen, we've learned some lessons. I have some like experimentation that I want to do. I want to go and like dig in the earth for a solution for this thing that's been bugging me for the past couple of weeks. And then when we reconvene, like we kind of know where we want to launch from there.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I wanted to call out to. I mean, I obviously, I've talked to Rick before, recording this, weeks in different moments and stuff, and so have some context. But that's what I love about this, is because, what you were describing, it's so explorative in terms of, testing, finding like systems that really work. But then this whole approach, and it's like having these small batches, giving yourself times, breaks, different focus time on different areas, and then getting back into this and in the project. And I mean, you gave me an update just moments before we recorded where you're like, hey, we had some things dialed in, and we spent a good solid month on this and made some serious progress and stuff. And the fact that you said, several weeks, I'm sure some people are like, wow, because at first it sounded like the way you were describing it, it took forever, but it was real. And that's what I think is so important in understanding, these intents, these purposes, and everything that you're designing for. It's still open, and it can still be almost, to some people's idea of it, is like hyper focused, even though you're not. And again, it all depends on what you're going for. What is the intent? So anyways, that's what I want to call out to, because I think there's lots of great things with this approach, or at least the way that you guys approach it.
Yeah, I think so. Well, the one thing about it on the creative output of it is that we're scoping for 4 factions on this thing. And before we know it, each of the members working on the game had like a favorite faction that they're like, close to their hearts. And, like, for example, Cat wants an all kitty faction. And that's really important for us not to say no to,
anime style samurai cats with DBZ energy beams.
In the case of me, I want an evil henchman faction that's kind of silly, and Rick had one at his heart.
Yeah. It's like a tribal animal affinity faction where like you got people who run up and like they swear. There's like shamans who summon spirit wolves, and like people who throw spears, and berserkers who run up and do whirlwinds with their axes. You can summon a giant like golem. But yeah, it's like,
there was a project where a tribal element was suggested, and that was kind of shut down really fast. And it's just like, why don't we talk about it? No thing should be like, shut down right away, because of X reason, like because it doesn't adjust to the design. Like, for example, take the cats. The cats wouldn't adjust to like an RTS design, but you never know. it's not in the best interest of a team to shut down things so much, particularly if nobody gets paid in this case.
Yeah, so we've got the Space Marines, we've got the people from the jungle, we've got the anime cats with energy attacks, and we've got the mad scientist henchmen.
It's very important that they're like 1950s scientists. And you know what? We'll try to make it work. It's going to be fine. You know.
The point is they all have bases and they're fighting.
Yeah.
In the title.
Yeah, I love it. And
I do want to say, you were talking about how we've done this so fast, like in a period of 8 weeks to develop the game that you've seen. But it sounds like it happened in such a long period. Like I said, this is the 8th project we've worked on, and one of the things that I can't stress enough to any developer who's listening, especially if like you're still trying to like find a good team and find people to work with, is it is necessary to build working rapport with people and understand working styles and find people who you work well with, who you just like have a chemistry with working with. We have taken time to work together, to learn each other's workflow, and as a result, we work together efficiently. So there's other tricks that we use. Like I personally have a system that I use for building games in a quicker fashion, but Rodrigo is like really good about working in a cycle with me personally that we synergize off of each other. Rodrigo's like crazy prolific. He works fast. And
we have some work sessions where like we'll animate together and they go super fast once you do that.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. This kind of goes back to like the understanding of like being an engineer who understands a little bit of art versus an artist who also understands a bit of engine implementation. I have studied the animation production process. I understand Disney's principles of animations. I can talk about like, hey, listen, if you do this, like, try to create that motion line, but like, use the smaller stroke for distance, to imply like a swirling scoop, right? And so like I can offer very specific technical suggestion to get to what I'm aiming to achieve. And it's something that communicates in the artistic lexicon. And I think that really helps us have effective collaboration sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. And, based off of that, I mean, you already gave some, but what would you say to, devs, especially solo devs or, people with small teams that are trying to kind of balance, art and code, but obviously everything else too, that don't have these formal roles? What are some, tips or suggestions that you'd give to them in terms of overcoming some of these things or concerns that they might have?
Find the right people to work with. There's going to be hard skills that you develop, like learning how to develop a proper production plan and how to get people bought in on it. But having the people who you can work with, who you have good chemistry with, who you want to build the same kinds of games is important. And so the best thing you can do is get to know a lot of other developers to find your team. If you're doing solo, like that's a different thing. I personally consider game dev a team sport. It's better off with a group of people because one-man band only goes so far. So find, like, vibe your tribe. Go out and do jams and find the people who you can work with and do multiple jams. And if you want to build a bigger project, don't commit to the bigger project unless you've already been able to successfully do multiple smaller projects with them.
Yeah, it's like when drawing or anything else, they tell you have to get all in drawing, they tell you have to get all your bad drawings out of your system. So you have to do many drawings, especially in art school. And same thing for like, sports people. They have to like train like crazy, as soon as possible, as early as possible. And it's the same thing for games. Get those bad games out of your system. Go do game jams, do bad games very quickly, and you'll learn a ton. I also think that one thing that game jams really teaches you is just, to be patient, to be very, very nice to people, and to just assume good faith. I mean, people want to create good games,
Yeah, it's funny. I think I'm remembering this correctly, but as you were saying this, Rodrigo, I was thinking of like Wayne Gretzky. I think it was him, where it's like the only bad shot is the one you don't take. You
never know. You never really know. Another thing that really I think helps for a lot of developers is a lot of starting developers, like they fixate on things that are terribly trivial. Like they fixate on what game engine they should use. whichever one you're using is fine. You don't have to like overstress or analysis paralysis on that part. And at the same time, just look at what you're doing as a solo developer. Look at your budget. Is your budget zero? Just be conscious about that. Try to get hip to really fast ways of working.
Yeah.
It's what I would say.
Pareto principle there. If you get 20% of the effort gets you 80% of the way there. Like they say by the time you're 90% done with your game, you're halfway there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that polish. So like if you can approximate your best version of the game, then you're doing good, because it's like in a jam, right?
No.
Do your 2-day jam, approximate it. Do your 7-day jam, approximate it, and steadily refine and get better at it, because otherwise you're spinning your wheels in a lot of inefficient burning of energy.
Yeah, and you should do the solutions that are right in front of you. Like I always bat away, like when people say like, we'll use an asset pack, and it's like, why don't we use an asset pack and just try to do it, homegrown and see where that takes us. Like people have a lot of solutions sometimes where they assume they have the solution. It's just like, maybe, I mean, why don't you try it from yourself, see what happens, before you kind of just do these quick solutions that you're so certain are going to work out. Like just try it yourself small first and then see what happens.
Yeah, I like that approach too, because sometimes, like, if I put myself in a scenario where, hey, if I had to make a choice, what would I do? And a lot of times I default to like, an asset pack type thing. Not that I'm making a game anytime soon, but I've, dabbled with some friends and stuff, and that comes up. But at the same time, it does go against like one of my own principles is like, sometimes it makes all the difference in the world. You don't have to be an expert, a pro at these things, but it can make all the difference in the world if you just understand what's required, what it takes and stuff. Because then I think when you are, let's say, using an asset pack, at least you have a better understanding, maybe of that process or anything else for that matter. And it's just going to get you that much more prepared than if you just always lead for those quick solutions. It doesn't mean you can't use them, but in a way, if you lead with them, that could be a form of taking a shortcut. And sometimes shortcuts aren't going to pay off.
Yeah, I think stuff like the asset packs, you really have to look at whether using them is taking the creative expression away from a team member. So for example, if you have somebody who wants to build your 3D tile set, and you say, well, let's just use the asset pack, then you take that away. But if somebody just wants to build cool levels, then you can download the asset pack and they can use the asset pack because their creative expression is using the pack to build the levels.
Right. Yeah.
So like that, I think that you can use asset packs very effectively in a situation where you do not have the creative horse or the personnel on board who would be creating those assets for you.
Yeah.
If you can't find anybody, just bring something in and then someone else can use it.
Yeah, it's all a matter of perspective and how you approach these problems that you're solving and everything else. There's, creative solution making, if that's awesome. Well, guys, I know we're coming on time here and really can't thank you enough. Such a great conversation and kind of dives deep into these processes and everything. Hey, if, anyone listening today is, wants to connect, learn more about your project or anything else, what are some links that people can do that?
Well, I have a game released. It's called The Sand Knight. You can find me on LinkedIn. There's a picture of me with my cat on my shoulder. And I'm also a part of the Indie Game Academy, the Baltimore IGDA. And I'm pretty active in the Baltimore, DC region. So if you come looking, you'll find me.
I'm pretty active on our Discord servers, on the local one for Baltimore indie games.
Yeah. If you want to email, you can email info@Landline Games. And
awesome.
You can reach out. I do projects on contract. So
okay. Awesome. and Rodrigo as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, guys, really can't thank you enough. Those links and info will be in the show notes. And yeah, it was really a pleasure having you guys on the show and diving in deep to this process and how we can kind of really start understanding and ways to bridge this gap between devs and artists. Rick, Rodrigo, really appreciate you being here today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks so much.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.